Hey everybody, real quick, if you need a recap of The Night Agent Season 1, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner, and it'll take you right to it. Now, Season 2 picks up 8 months after the events of Season 1. Peter is fully immersed in night action, and he's working in Bangkok. He's even got a partner. Her name is Alice. And at the moment, they're posing as newlyweds, but what they're actually doing is tracking a government employee that they think is selling secrets to another foreign government. They're doing a really good job of staying off this guy's tail, while also keeping a very close eye on him, and that's when they see it. They see the drop. They watch Warren, the government employee, walk up to a bald guy, which neither of them recognize, and that is a problem. They don't see whether or not there was an exchange of anything, so they have to tell both of them. Peter takes Warren, the government employee, and Alice takes the new bald guy. It takes a little bit, but Peter does in fact see Warren drop something off in a flower bed. He's then able to confirm that the item is a flash drive when he sees a random guy he's also never seen before pick that flash drive up. He's also noticed a fellow who's wearing nothing but white and keeping a keen eye on him. Again, someone Peter doesn't recognize. Peter, however, is just a horse with blinders at this point. He's following the guy with the thumb drive, trying to figure out what exactly is going on. All the while, he's keeping Alice abreast of the situation because they have radios. It's while following this guy that Peter gets made. He starts getting shot at. He has to shoot back. And while trying to evade bullets, he tells Alice, "I'm made." And it's about 2 seconds later that Alice also gets made. Realizing they're in a jam, Alice calls for an extraction. She calls the night agent. After getting the location of the extraction point, they're both trying to figure out exactly how either of them got made. They can't figure it out. It makes no sense. They finally do see each other, and they're both about to head to the extraction point when Alice gets shot and killed. Peter runs into a building, and he also calls the night agent. He lets the new guy know that Alice is dead, and he needs the extraction to be hurried up a bit. That's because he's got 3 guys on top of him. It's only a matter of time before they bust in and they find him. He tells the new guy to put him through to his handler named Catherine, because he wants to let her know that somebody burned them. Somebody knew about the extraction point, about what was going on, and she needs to find out who did because there's a chance he doesn't make it out alive. Shortly after telling Catherine that Alice is dead, he has to hang up because those 3 goons are on top of him. They throw grenades. Peter narrowly survives, but he is able to escape, and he goes on the run because he doesn't know who he can trust. A month after this, Peter still is missing. No one in the States has heard from him, and that, by the way, includes Rose, who hasn't heard from him since he was on that tarmac. But everything that's happened to Rose has forced her into deep therapy that isn't really working. She's dealing with PTSD and just a lot of overall stress, anxiety, like you name it. She's trying very hard to get on with her life, but it's difficult. She has, by the way, taken a new job. She's a programmer with a company that essentially is able to take a photo ID of somebody from a public camera and creates for them a precise advertising profile based on their online history. And Adverse, the name of it, is super high tech, and apparently it's the best of its kind. But during a pitch to a potential investor, Rose is getting distracted because her phone keeps ringing. And when she looks at it, it just says international unknown. But after putting it to voicemail twice, it calls again, and at this point, Rose can't ignore it any longer. She steps outside and she takes the call. The voice on the other end says, "Hi, I'm looking for Peter Sutherland. Do you know where he is? He's in trouble, and I really want to help him." And a concerned Rose says, "Where is he? How do you know him?" But this mystery man on the other end just says, "Has he tried to contact you recently?" Rose starts trying to figure out what's wrong with Peter, what happened to him, and who this voice on their end is. But he just tells her that he knows she cares about him, so he figured that maybe Peter would reach out, but he'll call her in a few days, and then he hangs up, leaving Rose completely confused. Rose, not knowing really who to call or what to do, does an ultimate power move. She calls Michelle Travers, the president. She tells her what happened. And Michelle has Catherine drop everything and head to meet with Rose to find out what Rose knows. Rose starts asking questions about Peter, and Catherine explains that Peter works for her. He went missing about a month ago, complete AWOL status. And the only reason she's there is because Rose got a call from somebody regarding Peter, and this was a personal favor from the president. Rose, though, is so concerned with Peter that after debriefing Catherine on exactly what happened during this phone call, which isn't much, she starts demanding answers as to what they're doing to locate Peter because she's concerned. Catherine gets real with Rose and says, I'm one of the few people that knows exactly what happened at Camp David last year, and for that, you have my eternal thanks. But you are a civilian, and the answers you seek are not yours to have. If I find Peter, I'll let you know he's safe. But for now, drop the words night action from your vocabulary. She then hands Rose a card and says, if that voice calls again, contact me. And of course, if Peter calls again, contact me. But none of this is good enough for Rose. She heads into work, and using Adverse, she starts searching for Peter. It's completely against company protocol. You're not supposed to use it for this sort of thing, but she doesn't care. In her opinion, if the U.S. government isn't doing enough, well, she will. It takes all night, but Adverse works. It catches Peter in the background of some random girl's Instagram photo at a New York hospital. Now she has to get on a plane and go across country, so she gives her boss a bad excuse that her mom's having surgery, and she goes to locate Peter, who is in New York City. He's been monitoring Warren, the guy who made the drop in Bangkok. Well, he's been monitoring his old house. Warren doesn't live there, but Warren's ex-wife and Warren's kid live there. And what Peter's done in the last month is cozy up to that family and start coaching Warren's son in basketball. It's through teaching basketball that he was able to find out that Warren has been in contact with his son, Ethan, through a Telegram-esque app. That way Ethan can hide it from his mom, but yet still stay in contact with his dad. This is a huge breakthrough for Peter, who, by the way, is telling everybody his name's David. Well, it's a huge breakthrough for Pete David, because he knows that in order to find out exactly who burned them in Bangkok, Warren's their best option, and now he's got an in order to contact Warren. He just has to get Ethan's phone, which he's easily able to do while Ethan's shooting free throws. He just swaps his phone with Ethan's. When Peter gets alone, he opens up Ethan's phone and he starts chatting with Warren using that app, asking Warren when exactly they can meet up and see each other. Warren tells his son, or at least he thinks, that they can meet up tomorrow, and later on he'll send him details. Right on cue, the next day Ethan's dad texts Ethan's phone and says, hey, 9 o'clock, we'll meet at this location. But what Peter doesn't know is that Rose has arrived in New York, and using Adverse, she was able to locate the hospital, which led her to the basketball court, which led her to Ethan, who let her know, yeah, I think he swapped my phone with his by accident. We've been trying to get a hold of him, but we can't. And of course, Rose is kind of a hacker, so she's able to locate that phone, which thus leads her to Peter, who had to jump through a bunch of hoops from Warren. Warren didn't make it easy on Ethan to meet up with him. It was like, hey, meet at this location, get on a bus, get off at this stop. It was that sort of thing. The whole time he was covering his tracks just in case Ethan wasn't Ethan, which it turned out he wasn't. It was Peter the whole time. Eventually, though, Warren realizes that his son was not the person he was talking to. He takes off running, and Peter runs after him. They run into an abandoned opera house. They get into a scuffle, and Peter, who has Warren at gunpoint, tells him to get on the ground. But Warren realizes, wait, you need me alive, and he's once again able to escape. As Peter is trying to track him down and run after him, that's when he runs into Rose, and he's very surprised. He did not expect that. But before they can catch up, Peter and Rose get shot at by that bald guy back in Bangkok, the same one that initially spoke to Warren. While all of this is going on, Catherine headed back to Washington to give Michelle Travers an update. It's not just Michelle, though. It's the deputy director, Mosley, as well. And Catherine says the update is, we still don't know where he is. He went AWOL. And Michelle's a lot like Rose. She can't figure out exactly how the Bureau hasn't located Peter yet. Michelle then asks, have we figured out what happened in Bangkok yet? And Catherine says, we know some, but not enough. That's when she starts going in on Peter, because she never wanted Peter. She was always concerned with Peter, and that's because of Peter's history with his father. Michelle, though, makes it clear. Peter saved her life, she values that, and she knows that Peter wouldn't just go AWOL, working for another government or another agency, which seems to be a concern with Catherine, or at least she's not ruling it out. Catherine also says they don't know where Warren is. And that's when the president says, then you need to be in New York. In episode 2, Peter is forced to abandon Warren. Now he's got people shooting at him, and he's got Rose to protect. So he's got to get the hell out of there and make sure Rose is okay as well. He does end up getting into a scuffle with one of the guys who's chasing him. Rose helps out, and they're able to escape thanks to an Uber. When they get back to Peter's apartment, the first thing he says is, "You have to tell me how you found me." And she explains that she found him via a picture online, he was in the background, but she assures him that no one else knows where he is. She then gets into the reason why she showed up, the fact that she hasn't seen him in 10 months, the fact that she got that phone call, she had the conversation with Catherine, and she starts asking, "Peter, what the hell's going on?" And it takes a little bit of prodding, but he finally says, "I'm after this guy, Warren. He's the key to all of this." He then goes on to more specific details on what the key to all of this actually means. The fact that he was on an op, the fact that it went bad, and his lead right now to find out why it went bad is Warren. That's why he cozied up to Warren's son, started teaching him basketball in order to get closer to Warren. They then go to bed, and when Peter gets up, Rose has already beaten him to it, and she's using Adverse as a way to try to find Warren. She starts getting into some really technical mumbo-jumbo about how Adverse works, but one of the downsides of it is you can only go about 12 hours back, so while she has a lead on Warren heading into the city, she doesn't know where he went after that. What comes as a surprise to Peter, though, is the fact that Rose reveals this isn't her company. This isn't even her code. She's just an engineer with it. Rose does ask him a pretty obvious question. Why didn't you just go to Travers? And he says, well, it's not that simple. I can't just go to the president without having Warren and without finding out what Warren sold and who he sold it to. I also don't know who at night action is compromised. It could be Catherine. So I need concrete proof on what is going on. They then notice in the surveillance footage that Ethan is leaving the townhouse. Peter knows that Ethan is heading to his basketball game, and if Ethan's heading there, that's a really good spot for Warren to grab him. He thinks that Warren is trying to get Ethan out of the country. So Peter goes to take off, and Rose says, well, I'm coming with you, which Peter protests. He doesn't want to worry about protecting her, but she says, I'm coming because I can't be alone right now. So reluctantly, he takes her with. And it turns out Peter's hunch was correct. Warren was waiting in the locker room for Ethan to show up, and when the team took the court, Warren grabbed his son and said, grab your coat, we got to head out of here now. Ethan, just being a teenager, started following his dad's directions, but that's when Ethan's stepfather stepped in. His stepfather and his mom were at the game. They were curious as to why Ethan didn't come out of the locker room, so the stepfather headed in, and that's when he saw Warren. And these two don't get along, because while Warren was overseas, that's when Joel, I don't know his name, I'll just call him a Joel, because it's always a Joel. Well, that's when Joel stepped in and started satisfying Warren's wife, if you will. The two ended up getting a divorce, this guy ended up moving in, and now he's playing dad. That's something that Warren doesn't really take kindly to. So he tells Ethan to go out, wait in the car, and then he starts tuning this dude up. When Peter and Rose finally do arrive, it's too late. Warren is gone. It's at this point that Peter has to reveal that he actually isn't David. He's an FBI agent. And he starts peppering Ethan's mom with questions on where Warren might have went, and she does have an idea of where he could have gone. The location makes a lot of sense because it's near a flight school and Warren knows how to fly planes. All Ethan's mom cares about, though, was getting Ethan back home safely, so Peter says, we'll go to the flight school, see if we can get him, and you guys head home, and if Ethan comes back, you'll be waiting for him. Peter and Rose head off to the Long Island airport, and they get there just as Warren is trying to usher Ethan into a very small plane. Rose is able to create a diversion, and that's when Peter strikes. While Peter and Warren are fighting, Rose is able to grab Ethan and get him away to safety, and when it's all said and done, Peter is bringing Warren out in handcuffs. When Ethan sees this, he's really confused on what's going on, and Peter has to tell him, hey, by the way, I'm not David, I work for the government, your dad's done some bad things, and trust me, I know how you're feeling right now. The whole time, Warren is just screaming, Ethan, I can explain, but Ethan doesn't want to hear it. After putting Ethan in a taxi to get back to his mother, Peter thanks Rose for helping him out because he knows he never would have found Warren without her. What Rose is concerned with is what Peter plans on doing with Warren. She wants to remind him that he is a good guy and he should, not go over the edge, if you will, in trying to get answers out of Warren. To which Peter completely understands and he says, look, when I'm done with this guy, I'll find you and I'll explain everything. And the two go their separate ways. Rose doesn't really know what her next move is, and Peter suggests that she take the Chinatown bus to Boston, fly out of Logan International, back to California, and he assures her, I will find you, I will explain everything. Peter then hops in the front seat of his conversion van, and he starts driving Warren to a safe site that he's already prepared to interrogate him. While this is happening, at this point, Catherine has arrived in New York City. She's trying to find Peter. No luck so far. And she gets a phone call from the heads of the CIA and the FBI because they got an interesting tip from one of their assets. The asset in New York approached the CIA about a potential U.S. intelligence leak. It has to do with the Iranians, and it looks like they've come into possession of some classified documents. They think it might have to do with what's going on with night action. None of this really makes sense to Catherine. I mean, why would Warren come back on U.S. soil, risk getting caught, all to sell secrets to the Iranians? But this is something that POTUS wants her to look into, so she's going to. And as for that asset, the woman's name is Noor. She works at the Iranian embassy. She's just an aide at the embassy, but she's an aide to the head guy. And because she's really well liked, she has a lot of access, which gets her some privileges, if you will, to swipe some documents and hand them over to the CIA and see if they're willing to swap the documents in order to get her family asylum from Iran. When she met with her CIA asset, she had documents that he told her, I can't really use these. So in order to curry favor, she blurted out, my boss has been having secret meetings with a U.S. intelligence officer. The problem is, Noor has no proof of this. These are just rumors going on in the embassy. But this rumor reached all the way to POTUS and then reached Catherine. Now, on top of trying to find Peter, she has this to worry about as well. She does, however, get a lead on the first one, Peter. When she got the phone call from the director, she was parked outside of Warren's old townhouse. She saw the taxi cab pull up with Ethan, and she noticed that in the other seat was Rose. So she started following Rose to see what she could find. Of course, she was looking for Peter, who at this point had made his way to the safe house. He's got Warren tied up in a chair with a camera so he can film his confession. And he tells him that he's not going to kill him, he's not going to torture him, but what he will do is hand him over to the FBI. They're going to charge him with treason, and then they'll rewrite the entire narrative of his entire life. So he asks him, what was the intel you were passing on in Bangkok? A frustrated Warren says his name was Arthur, at least that's what he said. I also got the feeling this Arthur guy wasn't the actual buyer, he was the middleman. To which Peter says, there was that guy in the white suit, no tie, he stood out, he was watching the whole thing. Who was he? And Warren tells him, I don't know, I only dealt with Arthur. Peter then asks him, who was the mole? Who was the guy that compromised the night action line and got my partner killed? And Warren tells him, I have no idea. What the hell's a night action? Look, I was working alone. You can kind of tell by the look in Warren's face that he is telling the truth. And he goes on to explain that he just wanted to get Ethan away from his ex-wife. The more he talks about that situation, though, the more he gets heated, he gets off track, and Peter has to remind him, okay, what about Bangkok? What intel were you selling? Warren explains that it was information about a covert military program at the CIA. The program was called Foxglove, and the file he sold was on the early stages of it. It was theoretical, and that entire program got shuttered years ago. But as Warren's explaining this, he gets shot by a sniper. Peter goes off and hides, but he hears the cell phone in Warren's pocket ringing. Peter grabs it, and he says, hello? In episode 3, the voice on the other end of that phone is, in fact, the guy that was dressed up in white in Bangkok. He called up Peter because he wants to strike a deal with him, but the deal sucks. He wants Peter to open up the door and let his men in, and then Peter is going to tell his men exactly what Warren said, and then who Peter told that to, and then in return, they're going to kill Peter. What does Peter get out of all this? They don't go after Rose. This mystery man makes it clear that he knows exactly where Rose is, and he can end her life at any time. And even after Peter says she has nothing to do with this, the guy doesn't care, because that's his leverage. Peter, though, doesn't take the offer. He tells the guy to go pound sand. He calls Rose up. He tells her, you got to get out of there, which he called it a good time because that bald guy is after Rose. And then Peter tries to get out of there. You've got Peter trying to evade bullets while he talks to Rose on the phone, letting her know exactly what she should do to lose this guy's tail. Unfortunately, the guy catches up to her. He's got Rose cornered and surrounded, and even though Rose is yelling for help, he just covers her mouth. But Rose, who was told by Peter to grab a knife, did that, and she stabs the guy in the arm, and she's able to get away. Still, though, she's running down the street, and she knows that this guy's going to be after her because that wasn't a death blow. And that's when she gets pulled into a corridor by Catherine. Rose texts Peter to let him know that she's okay, but she's with Catherine. And what Catherine can't figure out is how exactly Rose was able to find Peter. She's had her best guys trying to find Peter with no luck. More than anything, though, she wants to talk to Peter, which Rose is hesitant to do because she doesn't know who she can trust, but ultimately she brings Catherine to a meeting with Peter. They don't even get into pleasantries. Catherine asks him who the bald guy was because she snapped a photo of him, and Peter says that's the person who shot Alice. Peter, though, finds her story fishy, and Catherine finds Peter's story fishy. Neither of them trust each other, and they both make that abundantly clear. Rose is the one who brings them back to the negotiating table, and Peter reminds Catherine that he saw the buyer in Bangkok. He's the only one who can identify this guy. And the fact is, Catherine needs him. He does let her know that that guy in white did call him that night, shortly after he shot Warren and killed him. But when Catherine asks, did Warren give you any information? Peter lies and says, no, he didn't. He gets the topic, though, back to the mystery man. He says, that guy knows that I can ID him. And he knows that Rose is close to me, so I have to find this guy before he finds us. Catherine gives in. She says, fine. I have the FBI right now running facial IDs of this bald guy. Find out who he is and then find who his buyer is, or I'm sending you back to the White House basement. When Peter and Rose get back to Peter's apartment, they are able to figure out that the guy that called Peter, the guy in white, was most likely the same guy that called Rose out in California. They head to bed that night, and Rose is planning on heading back to California the next day. Catherine offered her some safety. But in the middle of the night, she wakes up because she's having night terrors. It's the first time you really get a look at her PTSD, and Peter gets a look at her PTSD. In the morning, Peter does bring it up, and she explains how she's been dealing with night terrors ever since it happened. She does talk to a therapist, but it really hasn't helped all that much. He can relate because he still dreams about Alice dying, and he blames himself for what happened to her. A little while later, they get the dossier regarding the facial recognition for the bald guy and what the FBI was able to find. He's got a bunch of different aliases. Luckily, though, using Adverse, Rose is able to exclude all of those names and use old facial recognition to try to find his actual identity. And they get a hit. His real name is Solomon Vega, and he's dead. Well, at least according to the obituary, he's dead. He's survived by one sister named Celeste. But as they dig more, Adverse cuts off Rose's access. That's because Adverse's founder was able to realize that Rose was in on the code. She was reworking it, and he is pissed. He shut down her access completely. He calls her up, furious. And Rose quickly makes up a lie about why she was using it the way she was, and he demands, you need to get back to California right now. We need to discuss whether or not you have a job. Rose tells her boss, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, I'll be there tomorrow. But then she goes right back to Peter. Because at least with the Solomon Vega thing, they have a lead, and that lead is the sister Celeste. They decide to pay Celeste a visit, and she's a quadriplegic. Rose tells Celeste that her father was in the Marines. Solomon served under him. Her father recently died, and she's trying to go around and talk to Marines that knew her dad. This lie is able to get them in the door, but Celeste tells them, I'm sorry, but my brother's dead. As she continues to talk, she's working on her candle business. To which Peter asks, do you have a card? Because he noticed that the cards are right next to the mail. So when he goes to grab a card, he also grabs a piece of mail. And the mail is Celeste's bank files. It'll give him an indication on whether or not Solomon is actually dead or not. They do see that his VA fund is going towards her, but then they see another deposit. It's from a place called KinCare Trust, so now they have another lead to go on about who this Solomon guy is and where he might be. As they refill for gas on the way back to New York City, Rose calls up Catherine. She gives her the good news that they have yet another lead. But when Catherine mentions the Secret Service sending Rose back to California, Rose asks her, what if I stay? I know you and Peter think I'm better off leaving, but I've felt safer in the past 12 hours than I have in the past 9 months. She then tries to mend the fence between Peter and Catherine. She lets Catherine know that she's seeking help, and it has helped. But Peter is still holding on to the death of Alice, and it's pretty clear to Rose that so is Catherine. Maybe they should talk about it. Catherine, though, is a little against that. As she puts it, I'm not a shrink. About an hour later, they do meet up with Catherine at a ferry location. Catherine was able to look into Solomon Vega, and what she found was very interesting. Pretty much his entire file has been wiped, which means somebody did that. Peter then tells Catherine, you need to tell me what happened in Bangkok, because if I'm going to trust you, I need to know what happened. Catherine explains that she flew to Bangkok. She spoke to every witness. She looked at every piece of evidence. Night Action is airtight. She then tells him, I know Alice's death shook you. I mean, it shook me. I was 2 oceans away. But the fact is, there is no conspiracy here. It's just a deal that went bad. Now, we can continue to ask why, or we can go after the guys that did this to Alice, but we can't do both. That gets Peter to open up about what Warren talked about with Operation Foxglove. After the whole Foxglove debrief, Catherine brings up the fact that Rose wants to stay under Peter's protection, and she fights for Rose. She says, look, that tech that she used helped find you, helped find Solomon. It may prove useful, but ultimately it's your call because you have to babysit her. Catherine gets a phone call. Peter and Rose talk about it, and when Catherine comes back, Peter says, I got her. She'll stay with me. The phone call, though, was from Director Mosley and the CIA director, Director Gedney. The search for Solomon flagged images that were taken earlier in the day by a, quote, CIA asset, who was Noor. At the behest of her handler, she was searching for new information. She found out that her boss had a secret meeting on the books, so she planted an AirTag in his person, and she followed it. She snapped some photos of everybody going in and out of the location, and that included Solomon Vega. Of course, she didn't know this at the time. She just thought, okay, maybe this can get some information that could get my family out of Iran. She did notice that Solomon showed up with a briefcase, and when he left, he didn't have it. When her boss left, though, he had the briefcase, and she thought that was interesting. Her handler, though, did not. But the image of Solomon Vega was filed, and that popped up when they searched for Solomon Vega. Catherine tells both of them that the CIA asset is Noor. She's looking for asylum for her family. And they're going to speak with her tomorrow because they're taking over her case. Not too far away, though, there is a rich bureaucrat named Thomas. Thomas's father has some political pull, but at the moment, he's incarcerated for war crimes. Thomas asks an old school buddy named Elliot, who's got some pull with the UN, to talk to his boss and get his father out of there, but Elliot has no interest. You could just tell that Elliot thinks that Thomas's father is a scumbag, even though they're friends. This really frustrates Thomas, but he and his girlfriend go back up to their hotel, and later that night, Thomas gets a phone call from his cousin. His cousin tells him, we took the whole thing. I know that wasn't the plan, but trust me, it's better this way. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And the thing that they took was Foxglove. Even though Warren was under the belief that Foxglove was shut down and it was old and all that, it wasn't. The chemical weapons were made in a laboratory. The laboratory was being transported. The transport was intercepted by Thomas's cousin, in which Thomas's cousin took the entire laboratory and killed 2 Marines in the process. In episode 4, the next day, Thomas meets with his cousin and he lets him know he is not happy about how this mission went down. He tells his cousin that he's a little stressed out because this thing has taken months to plan and it's a delicate situation. There's global implications. His cousin, though, asks, well, what about your dad? I mean, his sentencing's approaching, right? And Thomas says, yeah. But you have to understand, he's in the mess he's in because he's let militants like you stir him up. If he had just listened to me, he wouldn't be imprisoned while interlopers disrupt our entire family legacy. They then get interrupted by Solomon Vega, who sits down and says, I'm guessing because I was invited here, you want to continue our relationship? And Thomas says, yeah. The only thing is, I know why I'm doing this. I don't know why you're doing this. Solomon kind of chuckles and says, don't ask questions you don't already know the answer to. It's a sign of ignorance. And by the way, you're asking the wrong person. Then he puts the flash drive down on the table, the flash drive that he got from Warren in Bangkok, and then he leaves. When they get alone again, though, Thomas makes it clear to his cousin that he does not approve of him going behind his back and messing up the plan. And the original plan was just to document the mobile lab, use that information for blackmail, not steal it entirety and leave bodies in its wake. When Thomas tries to get all Tommy Toughnuts with his cousin kind of laughs at it because Thomas isn't tough. He's a rich brat billionaire. Oh, and on top of it, Marcus lets him know that everything he's done is at the behest of Thomas's father, the real guy calling the shots. Now, not too far away in New York City, Noor is meeting with her new handlers. Of course, she doesn't know this. She's understandably spooked, and Peter says, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't work for the CIA, but I've been debriefed on your case. I'm taking over your case, so I need to know everything about this guy that you took a photo of. And Noor says how this secret meeting took place. She documented it. She never saw the guy before, but she knows that her boss left with the briefcase that this bald guy brought to the table. Unfortunately, she doesn't know what was in the briefcase. And Peter says, well, I need to know what's in the briefcase. If you get that information, just make some copies of it and give it to me. I guarantee we'll get your family out of Iran. Noor asks, what if I don't do it? And Peter says, then you're never going to hear from me again. Noor explains to both Peter and Rose that her brother goes into the army next week. But she's got a busy slate coming up. Conferences, a party at the ambassador's place, meetings. She can't neglect it because if she does, it's going to look suspicious. This party, though, that Noor talked about could be Peter's opening. He wants to explore that avenue more. He thinks that this could be the perfect chance for them to grab the information they need. He asked Noor more information about it, and unfortunately it's not going to be easy because no phones are allowed, it's an exclusive guest list, and there are security cameras. Of course there are. There's also their head of security to worry about, Javad, who Noor's actually become really, really friendly with. She's single, and she's good looking, and he's single, and he's got a great jawline. So they've actually gone on some quasi-dates together, but don't get it twisted, this guy is military. Like, he is a stone-cold killer when he has to be. A lover in the sheets, but a menace on the streets. It's not all bad news, though. There are 2 stairwells to get to the study where the briefcase is being held. The security cameras also aren't monitored. And no, that about does it for the good news. And Peter's stressed out about this because this is not going to be easy for him to do. That's when Rose volunteers to help, but initially Peter pushes back on it. He doesn't want her involved. Rose, though, pushes back and says, if I get caught, I get kicked out. If you get caught, that becomes an international incident. Let me help with this. And Peter gives in. Peter makes some calls, and one of them is to Catherine. Catherine's able to get a Swiss attaché to pose as Rose's date. Noor then puts this guy on the guest list so it doesn't look fishy. Peter then game plans for this all night. He's going to pose as one of the caterers. He's going to get into the surveillance room, and then he's going to trip the wire. That should give them about 15 minutes to get into the ambassador's office, get what's in the briefcase, and get out undetected. The one issue is you need a key card to get in, and Nora's pretty confident she'll be able to get that key card, but she needs a diversion in order to get it, and that's where Rose comes in. She's going to create the diversion. The one thing, though, that Peter makes her promise is if anything goes wrong, she will turn around and walk out without hesitation. They then all get ready for that night. They all have their different roles to play. Rose gets picked up by her Swedish attaché. The guy's way older than her, and he explains that he's only doing this because he owes Catherine a favor. It seems like he owes her a few favors. It doesn't seem like, by the small talk in the limo, that he really wants to be doing this. When they arrive, though, Rose passes Javed's security test. She doesn't have a phone with her. But when she gets inside, she immediately starts looking for Peter, where the Swedish guy says, you're going to draw more suspicion by not mingling. And then he walks her around and he starts introducing her to people because he actually knows some people, including the ambassador at this thing. The Iranian ambassador is certainly surprised at the Swedish guy's date because Rose is so young. But then he asks her about the upcoming election. Michelle Travers is not running for re-election. She also has not endorsed anybody for the election, which has made some big waves. And while she's saying all the right things publicly, behind closed doors, she doesn't like her party's candidate at all. She can't believe that he's the guy they chose, and she's certainly not going to endorse the other person. So when the Iranian ambassador asks her, who are you picking, Knox or Hagen? She just simply says, it's an easy decision for me, and leaves it at that. She's then able to create the diversion that Noor needs by pretending to choke. The men around her come to her aid. Noor swoops in. She snatches the key card. But when Noor goes to hand the key card off to Peter, who is working the party, Peter gets called back by Javed. This puts a wrench in their entire plans because they know that time is running out in the security camera footage. Noor meets with Rose in a hallway and asks, what are we going to do? And initially, Rose starts to walk out the door because of what Peter told her. If things go south, leave. But then she stops, she turns back, and she tells Noor, give me the key card, I can do it. While Rose heads upstairs to the ambassador's office, Peter is busy helping Javed pour out wine. Peter starts making small talk with Javed, but Javed grabbing Peter wasn't just an accident. He's had his eye on Peter the entire night, because something about Peter doesn't add up. Javed, being ex-military, can spot somebody who is military. One of the tells was that Peter, when he walked into the room, started looking for an exit strategy. Now, this whole time, Peter is playing dumb. He's telling him that his name is Michael. He doesn't know anything. He's not who he thinks he is, but Javed is convinced now there's something up with this guy. So much so that Javed has security outside making sure that nobody gets in. That, by the way, includes Noor, who knows that something's going on. She goes to check on Peter, and she's able to confirm that Peter is in there with Javid, and she knows that's not good. She tries to talk her way into the room, but the two goons outside don't let her in, so now she needs to create a distraction to get Peter some breathing room. She does that by spilling a bunch of drinks on the Swedish guy. It causes a ruckus, and that gets Javid called away from his little interrogation with Peter. But not before Javid tells his two guys, take him down to the basement and make him tell the truth. At this point, though, Rose was able to get into the ambassador's office. Unfortunately, though, she's not able to get into the briefcase easily. It's locked. So she has to pry that thing open, but she does that. She takes the pictures of the documents, she puts the briefcase back, and she goes to leave. That, however, is when she's caught by one of Nora's coworkers, who knows that she's not supposed to be up there. And on top of it, she's holding a cell phone, and Nora's coworker knows that cell phones aren't allowed, so she starts questioning Rose on it. But Rose, thinking quickly, says, oh, yeah, I found this. Because the cell phone wasn't Rose's. The cell phone was Nora's. And when Nora's coworker sees the background photo, she says, oh, I know who this is. I'll get it back to her. But it was definitely suspicious. As for Peter, he tunes these guys up pretty good. He's able to get out of there undetected. Rose is also able to get out of there undetected, but the information that they were looking for is now on Nora's cell phone. When Peter and Rose meet back up in Peter's apartment, he gets really pissed off of the fact that Rose didn't leave as she promised. But Rose explains to him, I did it. Like, I got the key card, I got the briefcase, I did the whole thing. And while Peter's happy that they accomplished the mission, he feels like she shouldn't have been there in the first place, and now it's Peter who's putting her in danger just a month after Peter lost his partner who was actually trained for this sort of thing. So he's stressed out about it. All this sexual tension, though, boils over and they end up kissing. It's hot. It's spicy. The next day, they have to do a debrief with Catherine, who had a busy previous day. She headed to Solomon Vega's sister's place to talk to her, but she found out that Solomon Vega's sister disappeared in the middle of the night. I'm talking Baltimore Colts stuff. Mayflower trucks, gone. She then went to go check her mail, and she had an interesting package. It was Alice's ashes. She couldn't figure out why it was delivered to her. So she went to Alice's next of kin. It was a cousin, and he explained that, well, they used to be close with Alice. Then she got this job, and they started hearing less and less from her. And, well, the fact is, the person in that box, they don't know her. And what Catherine realizes is that Allison's dad sent the ashes back. She got so upset at this realization that she tracked down the director of the CIA. And she demanded to know what exactly Foxglove was because she found out earlier in the day that he was claiming he had no idea. And her feeling is, if somebody that I was close to died for this reason, you're going to tell me exactly what this thing is. So when she meets with Peter, she doesn't give him much information. She says that she was looking into Solomon Vega's ties with Foxglove, and she had an interesting dinner the previous night where the details are still incoming, but the whole situation has left her unsettled. She quickly, though, switches the topic to spreading Alice's ashes because they're actually meeting at the place where Alice used to debrief Catherine every single time they met. After spreading the ashes, they agree to meet up later in the day at a safe location. By this point, Catherine has gotten more information on Foxglove, and she shows Peter. It's really all the information left about the operation, and it isn't much. It's just loose names, chemical names. And Catherine explains that the idea of Foxglove was to conceive new synthetic weapons that the U.S. could get ahead of. Then the U.S. would create antidotes to counteract their effects. The only problem with that is you actually have to manufacture the chemicals in order to find out what's in them and how to treat them. The CIA and the U.S. military conceived 9 chemical agents in a mobile testing lab. And that testing lab got intercepted, and they don't know where it is now. This is broken up when Rose and Noor show up. Noor was supposed to bring whatever was in those files, but she doesn't. She doesn't bring what's in the files. She doesn't even bring the cell phone, because that's her leverage on getting her family out of Iran. Peter urges her to turn over the documents because they don't have time, but he says, we will get your family out. It's just going to take a bit. And Noor says, how long? Javid's looking at all the security camera footage. It's only a matter of time before he figures out it was me. Catherine tries to intervene and say that they need the documents, but Noor is steadfast. She's not handing them over until she finds out that there is a plan to get her family out of Iran, and it needs to happen by next week. In episode 5, Catherine decides, you know what, we'll give Noor till the end of the day to decide what to do, but if she doesn't go along with our plan, then we'll use it as leverage. We'll basically blackmail her and threaten to expose her to the ambassador. And that's something that Rose cannot figure out, how these people could do that to her. But Peter understands perfectly, because they can't let Foxglove get into the wrong hands. The problem is, Rose doesn't know what Foxglove is, because she doesn't have clearance for it, because she's a civilian. Rose, however, decides because of this, she's going to play devil's advocate. She asks them, okay, well, what happens if Noor gives you the information, but you take forever to get her family out of Iran and then she gets caught? What then? And the best that Peter can offer her is, let's hope that doesn't happen. Peter tells Catherine that he'll call Noor that night and present her with the options. And that disgusts Rose. But Rose is onto something, because when Noor returns back to work, she's so incredibly stressed out that it's noticeable. Not just to Javed, but to her friend as well. It forces Noor to lie and act like she's sick when she's not. She's just stressed. She, however, isn't the only one who's stressed. So is Rose. Her boss wants to talk about her future with the company. She was supposed to be back in California, but now she's going to have to go with a Zoom call. Her main focus at the moment, though, is what's going on with Noor. Noor, being a civilian, putting herself at risk like she has, Rose is siding with her. And when Peter gets back to the apartment, Rose pleads with Peter to do the right thing, try to get Noor's family out of Iran, which, by the way, is something they told Noor they were going to do. An exasperated Peter says, look, we're trying to get the CIA to expedite the process. But Rose reminds him it's the same CIA that he investigates in Night Action. Rose, though, works on him, and finally Peter just says, okay, I'll call Catherine and we'll try to figure something else out. The next day, Catherine has come up with a solution. It's a guy named Sami. He's been with Night Action for about 5 years. It's one of Catherine's best guys. They explain the hard situation they're in, and it's up to Sami to get into Iran and extract Noor's family, which isn't going to be easy. He's one guy, and this is an ill-prepared operation, but time is of the essence. Sami, by the way, is completely on board because he realizes that if he doesn't do it, it's going to leave Noor out to dry. Shortly after Sami agrees, Noor shows up and gets the good news that Sami will be going that night to get her family out of Iran. But what they need from Noor is information regarding the neighborhood, side streets, nosy neighbors, that sort of thing. Everything to make Sami's job easier for the next day. After this, they call Noor's mother and they tell her, pack your bags. Let your son know you're getting extracted. The one thing that Noor does request is to be in the room the next day when Sami is in Iran, so she gets word that Sami has her family safely on the plane. And they agree, reluctantly. Once Noor leaves, Sami has a question for Peter. It was a throwaway comment by Catherine about not losing another agent, and Sami wanted to know more details on that because it's clear that Peter is on edge about this situation, more so than Sami, who actually have to go into Iran. And Peter explains what happened in Bangkok. Sami gives Peter advice on how to handle a situation like that, and then he leaves because he's got to get ready to go to Iran. Peter heads back to the apartment where Rose was waiting. She had her meeting with the boss, and it actually went surprisingly well. While she thought that her job might be threatened, it's quite the opposite. He was pissed off, but after he actually looked at what Rose did to his code, he realized that he can make a boatload of money on this. Switch adverse from advertising to selling the product to government agencies around the world to basically monitor people. But that's not Rose's intention. And Rose does have a moral compass. So Rose, using her leverage, gets a raise and also wants an ethics board to look into the matter to make sure that government agencies aren't using this thing to spy on their people. They're using it for the right reasons. Peter then updates Rose on how his meeting went. But he also asks Rose, can you come tomorrow? Because it just seems like Noor's more comfortable with you around. And Rose has nothing to do, so yeah, sure, I'll be there. The next day is the day of the extraction, and it's got Noor completely on edge. When she shows up at work that day, it's all she can think about. Javed was nice enough to make her soup, but she doesn't care. She thanks him, but says, I got to get to a doctor's appointment. But that doctor's appointment's actually to go and wait by the phone to hear that her family is safe. Unfortunately, when that phone call does happen, there's an issue. Her brother doesn't want to go. And that's because her mom never told her brother that this was happening. And her brother, being stubborn, doesn't know who Sami is, doesn't want to go with him, doesn't want to leave his country. And Sami has to put Noor on the phone to explain, you need to go with this guy. But still, he's pushing back. He starts raising his voice. It causes an issue in the neighborhood. Neighbors get concerned. Police get called. There is an altercation, but Sammy is at least able to get Noor's mother and brother into the car as they head to the airport, but they're stopped by police. Sammy has to use his particular set of skills to take out the cops, but when he turns around, Noor's brother has a gun pointed at him, because Noor's brother has no interest in going to America. So much so that he shoots at Sammy, and Sammy's forced to shoot him, and Noor's brother dies. When the second phone call does come in, Peter answers and he gets the update from Sammy that the mother is on the plane, but the brother, he's not, because he's dead. Peter, though, realizing that this could be a big problem for getting the information from Noor that they need, lies to Noor. He tells her everything's good, your family's safe on the plane, in order to get that information. As for the people that originally tipped off Night Action, and I'm talking that guy in white and Solomon Vega, they have a meeting and they have a little bit of an interesting chat. After getting stabbed by Rose, Solomon Vega had to head to the doctors to get antibiotics. He did it, by the way, with his sister. His sister, worried about Solomon, pushed him to ask his boss for a raise, something he hadn't had in years. So he did that. By the way, he's not very good at asking for raises. He's pretty brutal about it. But they had a little downtime to kill until they met with an FBI informant. The reason they were meeting with that FBI informant was because they were looking into Peter Sutherland. And the FBI informant says, there's nothing on him. I mean, not recently. As of 10 months, the guy hasn't worked for the U.S. government. But Solomon Vega, the mystery man in white, they've learned that there was something about Peter Sutherland that happened at Camp David. So they asked the FBI informant to bring them papers on it, but the FBI informant tells them, there's nothing in here regarding Peter Sutherland. I looked. Though Solomon lets them know, we're convinced that he was there. We've heard it from a few sources. When they get back to the office, the mystery man in white says there's two possible scenarios here. Either Peter Sutherland is, in fact, working for the U.S. government, and it's with an agency we've never heard of, or he's working for another type of government. He then remembers, though, in Bangkok, he overheard Alice on the radio say, Night Action. They thought it was a call sign, but he wants Solomon Vega to look into it more. He also agrees to give Solomon Vega a 15% bump and a title, Vice President of Acquisitions. And that first acquisition he wants Solomon to make is Peter Sutherland. In episode 6, you get some backstory on exactly why Catherine wasn't a huge fan of Peter Sutherland in the first place. When she joined Night Action, her partner was killed in a mission. They were going after a guy who had a government informant. That government informant was Peter's dad. So she kind of always harbored some ill will towards Peter's dad and Peter because of the association, because she blamed them for the death of her partner. But it seems like that relationship is starting to get mended. They're slowly starting to build trust. An example of this is the mission that they just completed. Previously, Peter might have misheld this information from them, but as soon as Noor leaves because she's getting phone calls from work wondering where she is, Peter lets Catherine know exactly what happened. The fact that Noor's brother is dead. Rose, who is in the room, mind you, thinks you have to tell her. She deserves to know. But Peter points out to Rose, we don't know how she's going to react to that information, and we still haven't gotten the documents from her. They explain to Rose that for right now, it's the best interest of not only the investigation, but Noor. If they tell Noor, she starts acting weird. She goes back to work, and then what? They start wondering what's going on with her. They might look into it, and that's not good for anybody. They don't want Noor going back to the mission because of that. They want Noor staying there with them, giving them the information, and then Sammy picks her up, and then she gets the bad news. When Noor comes back into the room, though, she lets him know, I have to go back to work, because Javed has been questioning my best friend regarding the phone he found with Rose, and they know it's my phone. I can't leave my best friend out to dry like that. Catherine tells her, you really shouldn't take that risk. If they know what you're up to, it's not going to end well. But Noor is steadfast. I'm not leaving my friend out to dry. I'm going back, and I'm explaining myself. Realizing that there's no talking Noor out of this, Peter says, okay, well then text us when you're done. We'll pick you up. We'll take you somewhere safe. He then asks for the pictures, but Noor can tell that there's a different mood in the room. And when she looks at Rose, Rose won't even look at her back. So she asks, Rose, let me speak to you privately, knowing that she'll get the truth out of Rose. She doesn't, though. Rose kind of tells her the truth. She says, what they're not telling you is your brother got injured in the process of the extraction. She never tells Noor that her brother is dead. Rose goes on to explain that they're really desperate for the pictures. They didn't know how Noor would react to it. And this does piss off Noor, but she appreciates the quote-unquote honesty from Rose, and she hands over a flash drive with the password of the pictures. Rose then walks back in. She gives Peter the flash drive with the password and says, I'm going back to your apartment because I can't be here with you people. You make me sick. Peter's breach, though, at the embassy doesn't have Javed just looking at Noor or her friend. They also call up Solomon Vega. While Noor was away, Solomon went over to the embassy and they asked him, who gave you this list? And he tells them, we don't give up our sellers, just like we don't give up our buyers. Javed then shows Solomon a picture of Rose and Peter from the party and says, do you recognize them? And even though Solomon clearly does, he lies and he says, no, I don't. It's worth noting that neither Javed or the ambassador really buy the fact that Solomon doesn't know these people. They know he's hiding something. But that's the thing. Solomon Vega and the guy he works for, they have a bunch of buyers and they have a bunch of sellers. This wasn't a one-off deal. Peter and Catherine find this out when they open up the flash drive and they see a bunch of documents in French that have nothing to do with Foxglove. Essentially, these documents are useless to them. Catherine, though, realizes that there is a common link between Foxglove and the information that they got from Noor, and that common link is Solomon and the guy who called Peter. They throw out some hypothetical possibilities on what the common link could be, but they know it runs through Solomon. And with those documents, it's not a total dead end. They do have a lead. The documents were printed on a color printer. Color printers leave a little tiny digital footprint. You got to look really close to it, but you'll find it. It'll basically tell you where the printer was located when the documents were printed. Catherine decides to follow up that lead, and she finds that the documents were printed by a French diplomat, and she follows her. She has a meeting with her, and she hands her all the evidence she found. The fact that she could burn her to her own government and have her thrown in jail for the rest of her life as a traitor, a spy. But she's not willing to do that. In exchange, what she wants is a meeting with the person that the diplomat sold the information to, i.e. Solomon Vega. With no real option here because Catherine is holding all the leverage, the diplomat agrees to set up a meeting, and that meeting is going to go down late that night. As for Noor, she headed back to her embassy to explain herself to Javed, and the good thing for Noor is, because of the fact that Javed has a crush on her, he doesn't really get suspicious with her. He does seem to reprimand her from being upstairs when she shouldn't be, but it seems like he genuinely buys her story. They somehow, though, get into a conversation about the ambassador's daughter and how the ambassador is estranged from her because when the daughter went to study abroad, she met a guy, fell in love with him, and kind of just disowned her country. It really pushed the ambassador's career back by about a decade. It gives Noor, though, an inside look at just how loyal Javed is to his country, because he finds the fact that the ambassador's daughter dare go and fall in love with some foreigner as a deplorable act. Noor leaves the office, she heads back home, and she waits to get picked up later that night to get to safety with her family, or at least she assumes. But she gets a knock at the door, and it's Javed. She gets really nervous because Javed wants her to come with him, and he's not really giving any information. He takes Noor back to the embassy to talk to the ambassador, and once again, Noor is really on edge. She's nervous. But the reason why they want to talk to Noor is because they found out what happened to her family. The fact that there was a disturbance, the fact that her mother was taken and is missing, and the fact that her brother died. And they want Noor to ID the body. Now, at this point, Noor thinks that her brother was just injured. She had no idea that he actually died. And she can't believe the fact that she's looking at a picture having to identify the body of her dead brother. Now, back with Peter, he gets the phone call from Catherine about the French diplomat and selling secrets to Solomon. Catherine tells Peter that there's a meeting that night, and they don't really have time to plan anything, so she's going to go to the meeting because she's the only person that Solomon can't ID. What she needs, though, is Peter to keep watch on the building, and ideally they'd need somebody to keep watch for surveillance tape, but Rose at the moment is pretty pissed off at Peter. She's really not willing to help. So Catherine says, well, I'll ask her to help. Before the meeting, Catherine goes to the apartment. She talks to Rose. It's at first a very contentious relationship where Catherine brings up Rose's aunt and uncle. But Catherine just gets real with Rose and says, I'm desperate right now. I need friends because I'm about to walk into a situation that they could possibly kill me. So please, help me out here. And eventually Rose agrees, but she tells her, no more keeping me in the dark. I need to know what Foxglove is. Catherine already got clearance to tell Rose, and she debriefs her. They then all head to the meeting, and they're all in place. Peter is on the rooftop. Catherine is heading in with the French diplomat to meet Solomon as an introduction. Rose keeping an eye out via surveillance. When Catherine heads into the building, though, Rose is giving Peter directions on all the people that Solomon has outside working for him and what they're up to. But then she notices something interesting. If she tells Peter to go left, they go left. If she tells Peter to go right, they go right. She realizes that these people can hear them. Rose has to call Peter's private cell phone and let him know, we need to lose these people ASAP, and it takes a lot of work. Eventually, though, they're able to lose the tail, and Peter's able to go into the building. He's going in, though, to a hornet's nest, because this whole meeting was fishy to Solomon and his boss from the jump. First of all, they've never had an asset try to set up a meeting with another potential client. They take their job very seriously, and they vet sources. They also didn't really buy the fact that Catherine was just willing to sell to her country so quickly, even though Catherine was doing a really good acting job. Solomon wanted to get to the bottom of whatever this is. So he knew that he couldn't work with the French diplomat anymore because she probably just sold them out. He shoots her, and he turns the gun on Catherine and says, you're going to tell me everything about Peter Sutherland and Foxglove. But as Catherine is trying to buy herself some time, telling Solomon, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just here to do what I told you. Sell secrets. Peter's able to get to the room. At that point, it's 2 versus 1. Catherine knocks Solomon on the ground, and then they have him at gunpoint. Now, as for the guy who actually has the information that was given in Bangkok, Thomas, he is in a meeting with his father to find out what the hell was going on with his cousin. Thomas is pissed that he wasn't brought in on the details of what they're doing. And Thomas's father, who is in jail for war crimes via the United Nations, tells him the United Nations bends to the will of America. By having your cousin do what he did, we're going to expose the hypocrisy of the United Nations in America by making an example on American soil. I didn't tell you because it's your name filled on all the accounts with my money. Thomas says, you really think I wouldn't release the funds if you told me the truth? And then Thomas's dad gets really personal. He basically calls Thomas a bitch and says he's not prepared for this kind of work. He's somebody who always wanted all the glory, but none of the blood. Thomas takes this super personally, so later that night he calls up his cousin and he asks, how are the preparations going for tomorrow? Thomas's cousin says, yeah, we're on schedule. And then Thomas surprises him by saying, well, save me a seat on the truck. Thomas is about to get the glory, and he's also about to get some bloodshed. In episode 7, Peter and Catherine bring Solomon in, and it's weird because he's very comfortable. It's like he's not worried at all. And maybe that's because Solomon makes it very clear to Peter that he knows a lot about him. He knows what happened to his father. He knows why he was investigated. He knows that he started off in the basement in the White House. One of the bits of info he tells Peter is that the FBI never investigated his father until he was arrested. In fact, no one investigated his father until he was arrested. But what he implies is that his father was investigated by night action. Catherine, who is watching this exchange from outside, pulls Peter out to try to calm him down. She tells him, he's trying to get you off your game. They then get into a conversation about the fact that Solomon and his team knew exactly what Rose and Peter were up to the night before, and it seemed like they knew what they were up to in Bangkok. Peter asked Catherine, is there a chance that he has an FBI informant who would have given him the key codes to our comms? Catherine has no idea, but what she does know is that Solomon has contacts throughout agencies all around the world. What she can't figure out is what the motive is. As they start piecing it together, Peter hypothesizes that Solomon is nothing more than a broker. Which begs the question, who did he sell Foxglove to? Peter's phone then starts buzzing, and it's Rose. She's freaking out because there's something going on with Noor. His phone was buzzing because Rose was letting Peter know that Noor was freaking out, and she's headed to the basement. Rose is going to meet her, and Peter thinks he should be there as well. Peter heads over, and right before he arrives, Noor and Rose are talking in the basement. Rose having no idea that Noor already knows what happened to her brother. As Noor tries to trap Rose in a lie, she's able to successfully do it because Rose is sticking to the story that her brother was simply injured. Eventually, Noor just comes clean and says, I know what happened to my brother. You knew all along, didn't you? And Rose, being an honest person, says, yes, I knew. I'm sorry. As Rose is trying to explain herself while also apologizing, Peter shows up and he knows right away that Noor is aware of what happened to her brother. Peter does exactly what Rose was trying to do, explain himself while also apologizing, but Noor doesn't want to hear it. She's livid. All Noor wants is honesty, and Peter eventually gives it to her, telling her exactly what happened to her brother. At this point, all Noor wants is to talk to her mother and make sure she's safe, and Peter tries to get her to come to a safe house, but she says no. If you know that my mother is safe, put her on the phone. Unfortunately, when they call Sami, he doesn't answer. And a very fed up Noor says, well, I'll just go back to the mission, but Peter has to stop her and say no. At this point, they know what happened to your family. This is acceptable enough for Noor, and she takes off, leaving the safe house. But she's being followed by Javed. Javed was thrown off by Noor's entire mood recently. He decided to follow her and see what she was up to. So when Noor went home, she was able to stay at her place for a little bit until she was picked up by Javed's men and brought back to the embassy, where she was interrogated by Javed, who at this point knew that she was selling secrets to the Americans. Javed lies to her and says, do you realize they left your mother and they left your brother in the dirt dead? And that's who you betrayed your country for? Seriously? Those people. He says some really unflattering things to her, he intimidates her, and he puts his hands on her. He makes it very clear that she's going to be sent back to Iran as a traitor, and she's not going to enjoy the outcome at all. She realizes that she has to get out of this some way, so she reasons with Javed and says, what happens if I bring you Peter, if I bring you the American? Javed agrees to it, but he keeps Noor at the embassy, which prohibits Noor from meeting up at that location later that night, where her mom is there with Sami to pick her up. And the fact that Noor doesn't arrive, that's a red flag for Sami and Noor's mother. As for Peter and Rose, when they arrive back in the safe house where Solomon was kept, Catherine is a little bit antsy. While they were gone, Catherine interrogated Solomon to no real avail. The only thing she was able to get out of him was the word cyanogen, which meant nothing to her, until 10 minutes later, government officials said that a chemical called cyanogen was stolen from a lab by some group of mercenaries. They were posing as workers, but they had fake papers. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out these are the same people that stole the mobile lab. And yes, this is Tomas, and his cousin's job. This was the big mission that Tomas had to be a part of. But the thing is, they're not going after one chemical. They're going after a few different chemicals. They're hitting up a bunch of different spots because they're trying to make one chemical weapon. The problem is Catherine and her team, they don't know what chemical weapon they're actually going to make. Rose looks over the Foxglove file and she sees a bunch of PhDs that she figures, okay, these are the chemists that must have worked on the project. Let's just go ask them. It's not the best plan, but she finds a chemist that is pretty close by. He's teaching at a college, and she heads on over. Peter wants to go with her, but Catherine says, no, you can't. You need to go talk to Solomon because the only person he's willing to talk to is you, so get in the room and see if you can get anything out of him. Right before Rose does take off for Columbia University, she pulls Catherine aside and she says, hey, if the offer for Secret Service protection is still available, I'd like it because I'm ready to go back to California. That's something that Catherine doesn't really want Rose to do because Rose has been really valuable, but ultimately it is Rose's decision, and Catherine says, okay, yeah, I'll set it up. And the plan going forward is for Rose to track down this chemist from Columbia, see what he knows about the chemicals, and then head back and go to California. When Rose takes off, Peter does head into the room to interrogate Solomon. Catherine's on the outside watching the entire thing. And the first thing that Peter asks is, who stole the cyanogen? At first, he doesn't really give Peter much, but ultimately Peter's able to figure out that Solomon isn't calling the shots. The guy in Bangkok, the guy dripped out in all white, that's Solomon's boss. Peter starts working out the problem aloud. He knows that ultimately Solomon did the wrong things for the right reasons, and that right reason is his sister Celeste. Solomon's boss is clearly taking care of her. Peter uses this information to his advantage, telling Solomon that they could arrest Celeste for fraud. She's been collecting Solomon's government benefits because the government thinks that Solomon's dead, but he's not. A very frustrated Solomon says, really, is this what night action does? They incarcerate the crippled? And Peter says, no, we stop people like you. And that pisses Catherine off. She pulls Peter out of that room so fast, and she says, do you realize you just confirmed night action to this guy? That's it. Neither one of us says another word until Mosley arrives. because the director of the FBI wants to talk to Solomon. While Catherine and Peter wait for Mosley to arrive and interrogate Solomon, Rose has shown up at Columbia University and she's found the professor. His name is Dr. Cole, and at first Rose poses as a PhD student just asking questions, but he doesn't fall for that, so she has to get to the point. She pulls out information on Foxglove, and it spooks Cole. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He tries to call security. In order to stop him, Rose says, "People are trying to make one of these weapons. I need your help to figure out which one it is." Cole can tell by her face and just her general reaction that this isn't a drill. So Cole brings her back to his place because he's got everything regarding Foxglove in his files in his home office. When they arrive, just to be on the safe side, Rose does text Peter the location of Cole's house, and then she heads down in the basement. Cole explains to Rose that they took months hypothesizing these potential weapons and creating antidotes for him, but they weren't able to create antidotes for all of them. Eventually, Cole was taken off the program, and he was told that the entire program was shuttered. Then, a world leader named Victor Bala was arrested for using chemical weapons on his own people, and when Bala was deposed, he claimed that he got the weapon from the United States government. No one at the UN could corroborate this, so they just wrote Bala off as a war criminal, and a crazy one at that. Cole, however, having worked on Foxglove, realized that some of the symptoms that these people died with were eerily familiar to some of the hypothesized weapons that they created. Cole couldn't prove it, but he figured that the U.S. government actually completed Foxglove and gave one of these weapons to Victor Bala. But he figured he might just be paranoid. That is, until Rose showed up. Unfortunately, Cole doesn't really know what weapon they would go after next, not with one chemical. But then they get a lead, because Catherine calls up Rose and lets her know that another chemical was stolen from another lab. And now they know of 2 chemicals, which gives Cole enough information to proclaim that the agent that they're trying to create is called KX. Essentially what it does is it poisons the air so much where every time you breathe in, it's burning your insides, but it's also blistering your outsides. It's very, very painful, and it's very, very, very deadly. Cole then gives them the rest of the chemicals in KX that the group would be going after. That way, they might be able to catch this group trying to steal more of those chemicals. This delays Mosley interrogating Solomon. He heads to one of the places, Catherine's going to head to the other, and she tells Peter, keep an eye on Solomon, make sure he doesn't do anything. While he's not happy about it, Peter just became a glorified babysitter. While he's trying to do his best babysitting job, about an hour later, Catherine calls up and says, we got bad news. They hit this place earlier. They have 3 of the chemicals now. That's enough to create KX. Catherine tells Peter, me and Mosley are headed back to interrogate Solomon. You stay put. But he can't really help himself. Knowing that this terrorist group has enough to make this chemical weapon, it's got Peter completely on edge. So when he overhears Solomon say, you can stop all of this, just speak to my boss one-on-one, because I bet by now they have all the chemical compounds. But that isn't everything. These people can't build a chemical weapon on their own. They're going to need somebody to build it for them. A couple minutes later, Peter gets a phone call from Rose. Solomon was right. These people did need somebody to build a chemical weapon for them, and they chose Dr. Cole. Dr. Cole, his family, and Rose were at his house when the group showed up to take them. Dr. Cole's home is an hour away. There's no way Peter would arrive in time. And he's on the phone just listening to this skirmish go down. The group is easily able to get Dr. Cole and his family. But Rose, she's dispensable. The thing about Rose, though, is she's a really quick thinker. And she tells the group, I'm Dr. Cole's assistant. And he's not going to be able to build this weapon on his own. So you need me. And they take her with to keep her alive. Peter, having no idea what happened to Rose, decides to take Solomon up on his offer. He unlocks Solomon's handcuffs, and he leaves the safe house. And when Catherine arrives, nobody's there, and she feels like she has a big problem on her hands. In episode 8, Peter drives Solomon to an undisclosed location so that Solomon can call his boss and set up a meeting. But there's something that Solomon wants to discuss with Peter. It's whether or not he knows the name of the guy that Peter killed back in Thailand. Of course, Peter doesn't, and Solomon knows everything about Alice. And that's kind of the point. Solomon knows who he took the life of, but Peter, he doesn't care. To him, that wasn't a name, that was a number. But that number obviously had friends, family, people that cared about him. As they walk to the location where Peter is going to meet with Solomon's boss, Solomon does make it clear that he's walking into a situation where there are a few people there who would like to speak to Peter about the life that he took in Bangkok. The tension gets broken up when Solomon's boss shows up. And it's pretty clear from the jump that Peter doesn't think too much of this guy, because the guy is a glorified middleman who just buys information and then resells it to the highest bidder. But the guy says, no. I didn't resell Foxglove to the highest bidder. I sold it to the person who would be most effective at completing the job. Peter asks, why would you do that? And he says, well, I guess you have to ask them if you find them in time. And I'll tell you where they are, depending how much it's worth to you. What this guy wants is a case file from the United Nations. It's going to force Peter to have to break into the United Nations, find the case file, which is located on a computer. But it's not just on any computer. It's on the Secretary General of the United Nations computer. So this is a pretty important case file. If Peter brings him the file, he'll give Peter the location of where they're holding Rose and, more importantly, where they're trying to make chemical weapons. Again, though, the guy threatens the life of Rose. And that's when Peter realizes this really isn't about the file. It's about the fact that if Peter does this job for this guy, whoever he is going to essentially own Peter. In a way, this is Peter swapping his life for Rose's. Peter at this point doesn't have a ton of options, so he's going to accept this guy's deal and try to figure out the other stuff later. As soon as he gets alone, he calls the one person he feels like could get him access to the United Nations, and it's Noor. First thing he does is apologize, because he knows that she doesn't want to hear from him at the moment. Noor agrees to help, but she tells him, I need something from you, and I can only ask for it in person. So meet me at this location. And of course, the reason why Noor wants to meet in person is because she's planning on handing Peter over to Javed. When they eventually do meet a little while later, Peter just puts it out there. He apologizes for what he did, but he says, I need your help to save Rose. It's not just about that, though. This has all been about stopping a chemical weapon. And if I can stop it, it's going to save a lot of lives. He tells her he needs to get in the United Nations, and if she helps him, he can take her to her mother that night. And Noor thinks it's more lies, but Peter says no, it's not. To put an end to the argument, Peter just calls up Sami and he says, hey, put Noor's mother on the phone. And he does. And Noor's mother says, Noor, I'm in New York. And that is a huge relief to Noor. She realized at this point that she was played by Javed. Now that she knows her mother is safe, she has no interest in helping Javed, and she does want to help Peter. More importantly, she really wants to help Rose. Peter gives her the phone and says, just keep the phone and call Sami when you're done. He'll pick you up. Hell, he's probably tracking the phone anyway. Peter's not oblivious to the fact that he's got people looking for him, i.e. Catherine, and if Catherine's looking for him, pretty good chance that Sami's looking for him as well. Back to the topic at hand, though, getting Peter into the UN, Noor is able to do it, but there are some issues. The biggest one being that Javed and his men are outside, but Peter knows that he can take care of that. He hands Noor a taser, and they walk out, acting like Peter has no idea he's walking into this trap. He plays dumb, saying, Noor, what the hell is going on? Until he's surrounded by Javed and two other men. A fourth guy takes Noor back to their HQ. But Javed bringing two guys to this fight, it wasn't enough. Peter had a weapon. He started swinging that baton, injuring all of them and trying to get away. The problem is Peter didn't do a knockout punch. Javed was injured, but he got up and then he started firing shots into the van that Peter was trying to get away from. Peter crashed the van, and that allowed Javed to catch up to him. Peter and Javed once again get into a physical altercation, which Peter wins, and he flees. As for Noor, she used the taser to get away. Noor, however, headed right to the embassy to get Peter his access to the UN. She put the information in, she started printing the badge, and then she heard footsteps, so she was forced to hide under the ambassador's desk. Those footsteps came into the room, looked around for a bit, and then they looked under the desk and saw Noor. And the person was the ambassador. It was this moment where the ambassador realized that the leak was Noor. Noor, however, notices that on the desk is that French report that they got from Solomon. This is when Noor puts it together, why they wanted that French report in the first place, and why, more importantly, the ambassador has taken a keen interest in it. It's because his daughter is on that report. The ambassador is simply trying to protect his daughter by getting her off the list and then handing it over to his superiors, because the names on that list are going to be hunted down and brought back to Iran and punished. The ambassador, realizing that his daughter really didn't do anything wrong, she just fell in love with a guy who happened to be French, Wants to protect her, but it is against the law. And Noor cuts a deal with him. She says, look, if you let me go, I'll take this list to the French embassy. And I'll tell them, you got to warn everybody on this list to get out. They're coming for you. That'll include your daughter. This will allow you to have plausible deniability. You'll say that the traitor did it. They'll never think anything of it. They'll just think that the traitor was doing traitorous things. It's a really good deal for the ambassador, and he gives Noor a 10-minute head start. When Noor leaves the embassy, she doesn't realize it, but she's being watched by Sami, who calls up Catherine and says, hey, I've got Noor. She's leaving the embassy. What do you want me to do? And Catherine says, don't do anything. Just follow her. See if she leads us to Peter. But when Catherine got that call, she was already headed to Peter's apartment. And when she got there, Peter was there. He knows that he messed up, but he says, Catherine, you got to trust me on this. Solomon led me to his boss, and he told me he would tell me who he sold Foxglove to, and when he does, you'll be my first call. Catherine understands this predicament that Peter finds himself in, but she says, help us the right way. And Peter screams back, there is no right way. There's this way. You guys have no leads. This is our only option of finding Rose and, more importantly, finding Foxglove. Peter tries to walk away, and Catherine pulls a gun on him. She tells him at this point she's got to take him in. To which Peter says, if I spend the rest of my life in jail for doing the right thing, I can live with that. Peter is then able to get close enough to Catherine to disarm her, lock her in a room, and get away. He then has to go meet up with Noor to get his UN badge, but she says, little change of plans, I'm now coming with you. But as for Foxglove, they are in a discreet location. You've got Dr. Cole and Rose in the mobile lab with Dr. Cole's family sequestered. Marcus is calling the shots, and Tomas is trying to rein everything in, but he's failing miserably at it. Rose and Dr. Cole are trying to stall as long as they possibly can, but Marcus is very, very impatient. At some point, though, Tomas realizes that Rose is not actually working with Dr. Cole. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. At first, Tomas tries to play assassin. He tries to be Tommy Toughnuts with her, but Rose can tell that Tomas is not really like the others. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. She begs him to help them stop this. And Tomas, realizing she's right, realizing that Marcus has taken this thing way too far, agrees. He secretly talks to the doctor. He lets him know that he's planning on getting him and his family out of there safely, but things don't go like that. Marcus, trying to speed up production, brings out Dr. Cole's wife and stabs her, letting him know that she's not getting medical attention until they have their first vial of the chemical weapon. This definitely puts a pep in the step of Dr. Cole. He does create a small vial, which Marcus just acts like is any old drug. And Dr. Cole lets him know, dude, you need to be careful with that. That could kill everybody in this room. But there's only one person that Marcus wants to kill. It's Tomas. He gets Tomas in a room alone, and they start arguing about who actually is in charge. It ends when Marcus throws the vial, it breaks, and he locks Tomas in the room, and Tomas finds out that this chemical weapon is no joke because he dies. In episode 9, when Tomas dies, Rose and Dr. Cole both heard him screaming. After the stabbing and the fact that they're fairly certain that Tomas is dead, they don't have an option. They know Marcus isn't playing games. They're going to have to up productivity. And they create 15 canisters of the chemical weapon. After doing these 15 canisters, Dr. Cole thinks that's enough, but Marcus's men let him know it's not. Start a new batch. And Dr. Cole knows that 15 canisters could leak out of whatever building they're trying to attack and into the streets. So what he's going to do is he's going to slightly change the recipe. It's a risk because it might change the color, but it'll make the weapon ineffective. While they work on that, Peter and Noor are working on getting into the UN. When Noor realizes that Peter needs to get in a security general's office, she says, that guest badge isn't going to get you there. You need higher clearance than that. And that's good info, and Peter says, yeah, I'll figure something out. Noor gives Peter the name of a guy named Lars. He's the principal advisor to the Secretary General. He'll help you with whatever you need as long as he thinks you're important. Once they both successfully get into the UN, now it's time to go their separate ways. Peter tells her once she gets out, call Sami on the phone. He's tracking the phone, so he should be close by. He'll pick her up, take her to her mother. He then apologizes for everything he did, but he lets her know, I really appreciate your help with this. Noor heads to meet with a French rep who she knows that works at the UN to hand over the paperwork. She lets the rep know, you need to protect all the people on this list immediately. And the rep tells her they're going to kill you for this. But Noor says, I know what I'm doing. She then receives a phone call from her friend back at the Iran embassy, who tells her, Noor, Javed knows where you are. You got to get the hell out of there. He knows you're at the UN. This gets Noor to flee the building immediately, where she walks into a rally for one of the presidential candidates. There's a ton of people there, but somehow Javed is able to find her. And in the middle of this crowd, he grabs her and he tells her, I'm taking you back to the embassy. But Noor, thinking quickly, bumps into one of the guys that's at the rally. This guy turns around. He thinks that Javed did it. Javed tells him to pound sand. This guy has a bunch of people with him. And a fight breaks out. But it lets Noor get away. Unfortunately, during all of this, Noor's cell phone broke, so she can't call Sami. But as Noor is trying to flee the scene, she gets intercepted by Sami. Sami takes Noor to her mother, and it's a really emotional reunion for both of them. As for Javed, when he gets back to the embassy, he is banged up and bruised, and his day's about to get a lot worse. The ambassador is kind of sick of Javed. Javed has some choice words for the ambassador for letting Noor go. Even though the ambassador said, what do you want me to do? She ran off. Javed said some things about the ambassador's daughter. So, in return, the ambassador flexed his muscles. He brought Javed into the meeting, and he pinned everything on Javed. He showed security camera footage of Javed cozying up to Noor. And he said, look, I don't know what this is, but I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like you were helping out the traitor the entire time. A very angry Javed denies all of this. He says that the ambassador is completely wrong. He's never going to get away with this. But the evidence does look damning if you look at it from the side that the ambassador is pitching. In doing this, the ambassador just stuck everything on the head of security who was threatening him earlier and a girl who is now in FBI protection, all the while also protecting his own daughter. Now, as for Peter, he was able to swipe an IT badge leaving one of the elevators. He used this to go to the guy's office that Noor suggested. He just posed as an IT guy looking to clean up some of the files. But when Lars, the guy that Noor told Peter to look out for, comes around the desk and asks Peter an IT question, he notices what Peter's looking at. And Peter has no choice but to use some force on the guy. It's actually a good thing he does, because what Lars tells him is, the file you're looking for is not on this computer, it's in the archives. And I'll take you to him. Lars is not really a guy that looks like he gets into many fights. He does, though, attempt to put up one when they get near a UN security officer and Lars blows the whistle, but Peter just takes the security guard out and he gives Lars a look like, dude, seriously? Come on, man. Lars, knowing that that was his one opportunity to get away, says, okay, I'll help you out now. And he takes Peter to the archives. He tells Peter where he can locate the file, and Peter's able to grab it and get out of the UN, unscathed. As he's trying to get away, he gets caught by Catherine, and he runs. Catherine runs after him, and he ends up running through the same political rally that Noor was in. But in the middle of this rally is Solomon, who sees Catherine, he grabs her, and he puts a gun to her. It allows Peter to get away, but Solomon has big plans for Catherine. He brings her to a parking garage, and he tells her to get into the trunk of a car. Catherine's not about to do that, though. Catherine fights back, and she ends up killing Solomon. Peter, meanwhile, went to go meet up with this mystery man and give him the file that he wanted in order to get the location of Rose. But before he hands it over, he says, who is this file about? He tells Peter all about Victor Bala and the mess that he found himself in. But he said it would have taken somebody very high up in the UN or the ICC to tamper with that investigation, i.e. the Secretary General. Peter still is hesitant to hand over the file, and the guy tells him, dude, you've already paid for this. Your fingerprints, your facial ID, it's all over the UN database. You might as well hand it over and get your information. Peter hands it over. The guy checks the file. He finds the one he's looking for. And he also tells Peter, by the way, the UN security tapes with your face, fingerprints, it'll be wiped by morning. I take care of my sources. He then gives Peter the location of the mobile lab. He then hands Peter a phone because he knows he owns Peter. And he says, when I call, you're going to answer this. As promised, when he gets this information, the first person he calls is Catherine to let her know where they can find the mobile lab and Rose. As for Rose and Dr. Cole, their little stunt of trying to tamper with the KX didn't work. Marcus was onto them. So they decided to pivot and just create another type of chemical. It was a knockout agent. Unfortunately, they weren't able to knock out Marcus. He took the 15 canisters and he left, but he left 5 guys behind. And Dr. Cole and Rose figured they could knock out 15 guys with a chemical and escape. It does work. They find Dr. Cole's family. They also find Tomas's body. But as they try to flee, they realize that they didn't knock out everybody. There's 2 guys with gas masks chasing them down. By this point, Peter has shown up. He talks to Dr. Cole's daughter to find out exactly what's going on inside, and he heads in with a gas mask to try to save the day. Peter goes all Jason Bourne. He heads on in there, he takes out both guys, and by the time they leave, the place is swarming with cops. One of the people that's there at this point is Catherine. She goes over to debrief with both Rose, Dr. Cole, Peter, and when Rose mentions that Tomas Bala tried to sabotage the plan, Peter says, wait, Victor Bala's son? And Catherine says, wait, Victor Bala? Rose goes on to explain Tomas, but more importantly, the danger is Marcus. She knows he's headed to the UN because she saw the uniforms. Now it all makes sense. Peter says to both of them that Victor Bala blames the UN. He said that America sold him that chemical weapon that he was arrested for, but they covered it up. And now they know the plan is to use that KX on the UN. Time is running out for Catherine and Peter to stop it. And in the season finale, law enforcement flocks to the UN, where Marcus and his team are already set up as HVAC technicians. In fact, they're already up on the roof setting up the canisters to go live as soon as the UN General Assembly is packed. The deputy director intercepts Peter and Rose, and specifically, he needs Rose, because Rose is the only one who can ID Marcus and anybody on his team. And that leaves Peter and Catherine to hash this thing out. Catherine's pissed. For the second time in a month, her agent has gone AWOL. And Peter completely understands why. He just doesn't think this is the time to talk about it. He assures Catherine, look, once this is over and done, I'll turn myself in. And Catherine wholeheartedly expects him to do that. But now, they have to stop Marcus. UN police head up to the roof looking for Marcus, and they do find him, but Marcus ends up killing a couple of cops, taking their uniforms, and now, not only does he pose as a UN police officer, he's also got their comms, so he knows where they're headed. But he also can use this to his advantage by telling them, hey, I think I saw somebody over here, I think I saw somebody over there, and sending them to the exact opposite location of where he's going. Because at this point, Marcus has enough canisters set up where he thinks he can do damage. He's only got 1 remaining, and he needs to just get out of there. As he's trying to do this, Rose really shows what an asset she is. She's able to positively ID a member of Marcus's team, alerting officials to the fact that Marcus's team have switched uniforms. She's also able to positively ID Marcus, but it's too late. Marcus, posing as a police officer, escorts one woman to safety. During the frenzy, he just escapes. Nobody sees him. When Catherine and her team reconvene, they've got all but 1 canister. It's the one that Marcus was able to sneak out of. Now it's just a matter of finding out where Marcus is headed. Rose, once again proving to be the MVP, uses Adverse to locate 2 spots where Marcus could be headed, and one of them is Tomas's girlfriend's place. They were staying at a hotel. The other is a lawyer. Rose, Peter, and Catherine head on over, and they're going to split up. Catherine going to the lawyer, Peter and Rose heading in the hotel, hoping that they'll be able to find Marcus and stop this threat completely. And Marcus did, in fact, go to the hotel. He decided to set up the last canister in the HVAC system of said hotel because this hotel is where a lot of UN ambassadors stay. So if he can't take them out at the UN because likely the General Assembly will be postponed for the day, maybe he can take them out at the hotel. After setting up the weapon, he heads to Tomas's girlfriend's hotel room. And her big concern is, where exactly is Tomas? And Marcus tells her, he's safe, but the 3 of us need to flee the country now, which she's not really keen to do, especially with the fact that Marcus won't let her talk to Tomas. And Marcus, being very, very impatient, finally just pulls a gun and makes her realize, yeah, this isn't going to go the way she planned. She's now a prisoner. Now, right outside of the hotel, you've got Peter and Rose about to head in, but before they do, Rose wants a little bit of information on what exactly happened with Peter and how he found the location of the lab. And Peter tells her everything. The fact that he had to make a deal with this mystery man. And that sparks a bit of an argument because Rose didn't want Peter to do that for her. But as he explains, it wasn't just for you. It was for literally all the people that they would have killed. They realize that this really isn't the best time to have this argument, so they head into the hotel room, they head up to Sloane's hotel, they knock on the door, and Sloane does answer, but what they can't see is the fact that Sloane is at gunpoint. Sloane tells them that Marcus isn't there, but she uses a hand signal that's a universal distress sign, letting them know that he actually is there. While trying to figure out exactly how they're going to approach this situation, they hear Sloane scream because she tried to escape and Marcus grabbed her. That's when Peter told Rose, "Get out of here." But Rose isn't about to listen to that. She calls Catherine and lets her know what's going on, but as she is trying to get out of there, she overhears a maintenance man talk about the HVAC system being wonky that day, and she follows him because she has to know what's going on with it. She follows the maintenance guy up against his wishes, and she's able to find the last canister hooked up. And he lets her know that they've probably got 8 minutes until this thing goes off. So they have to evacuate the entire hotel. Meanwhile, you've got Peter in a standoff with Marcus, who's got Sloane at knife point. Peter trying to talk Marcus down, Marcus willing to die for the quote-unquote cause. But as Marcus is proclaiming that he will die a hero, he is unaware of the fact that behind him is Rose with a gun, signaling to Peter that she's going to shoot in 3, 2, 1. She shoots. It frees up Sloane. Peter puts 2 in Marcus's chest, and he's dead. With that threat out of the way, now they need to evacuate the hotel, but they're never going to be able to evacuate the entire hotel in about 6 minutes. They call up Catherine to find out what to do, and Catherine lets them know that there is one thing that could save everybody. They have to head up to the roof and trip the fire alarm. It'll shut off the vents. Now, because smoking kills, and that's nasty, they don't have lighters on them, so they have to use chemicals. Rose actually picked up something from Dr. Cole in that lab. They grab 2 chemicals from the housekeeping cart and anything flammable. They head up to the roof, they find where they're supposed to trip the fire alarm, and they douse all the flammable objects in this liquid, and they just wait for the chemical reaction. The chemical reaction happens at the very last second, but it works. It shuts off all the vents, and while the chemical weapon did go off, it didn't kill anybody. Crisis averted. While in prison, Victor Bala finds out that his master plan was thwarted. Back in the hotel, though, right before Peter and Rose head outside, Peter lets her know that he's about to turn himself in, but he wants her to promise him something. It's pretty clear Peter is in love with Rose, but Rose will never be safe if Peter is a night agent, and he's not switching careers. So he tells her, "Don't look me up, don't try to contact me, because if you do, you will always be a target. And you know that." And while Rose wants a simple life, she also really wants Peter. They, however, know that this is for the best, that they simply go their separate ways without contacting the other. They give each other one final hug, and then Peter heads outside to turn himself into Catherine, where he gets in the back of a van and he puts handcuffs on himself. A week later, he's sitting in an undisclosed location, debriefing both Catherine and her boss on exactly the crimes he committed. But they don't exactly know what to do with him. Yeah, he committed these crimes, but it was for the greater good. He didn't switch sides. That all changes, though, about 3 weeks later when Knox, one of the presidential candidates, drops out of the race at an unprecedented time, 2 weeks before the election. This basically clinches it for his opponent, Hagen, who will all but walk into the White House. The reason this is a big deal is because Knox dropped out of the race after somebody contacted the paper regarding Victor Bala, the chemical weapon, and the connection with the U.S. government. Why this is a big deal is because when Knox was director of the CIA, he spearheaded the direction of not only Foxglove, but the sale of the weapons, specifically those to Victor Bala. And this was all discussed in the tapes that Peter stole from the UN. The anonymous source took the audio from the files that Peter smuggled out, and they sent them to the New York Times. This clinched it for Hagen, basically. But what this means is that Catherine has finally figured it out, that this high-leverage broker was likely working with Hagen. He found dirt on Knox, and at the very last second, he forced Knox out of the race and put Hagen in charge. And this is a guy who thinks that he owns Peter, so why would he not think he owns Hagen as well? Which means he's about to own the President of the United States, where they're just going to give off weapons and information to the highest bidder. They take a walk over to the White House, and that's when Catherine reveals her backstory with Peter and his father. The reason why this is important for her to tell him is because she specifically remembers Peter's father saying, "I wanted to make things right." With Peter basically handing Hagen the election, she has an opportunity for Peter to make things right now. She wants Peter to determine the exact nature of the broker and the president, or the soon-to-be president. And the reason why she knows that he will be able to do this is because the broker gave Peter that cell phone, and eventually he's going to call it for a favor. He also removed all traces of Peter at the UN, and that was to keep him around. Catherine tells him when he calls, you do everything that he asks. You gain his trust, you find out who's on his payroll, and then we're going to destroy him. Now, this is going to be a very intense mission, and it's top secret. It's above night action, but she does tell him, if you do this, your slate will be wiped clean. And Peter is more than down. But we finally find out the identity of the broker. His name is Jacob Monroe, and he went to the same college as Governor Hagen. They met at a fundraiser about 8 years ago, and at the time, Hagen needed Monroe. Monroe wasn't about to just open his checkbook and help him win an election, but what he was willing to do is get him information in order to win that election, and thus own him. When he got that drive from Peter, he headed to the governor's, who, by the way, is worth noting, is being protected by Chelsea Arrington, and he showed him the dirt that he got regarding Patrick Knox. Right before he did hand over the drive, he told Hagen, let's not forget who works for who. But it's clear that Hagen doesn't actually think that he is being owned or controlled. And then finally, a quick update on Noor. Her and her mother got U.S. citizenship, but she was having trouble finding a job in her current field with her degree from over in Iran, so she became a librarian. Thanks to connections, though, that Rose had, Rose was able to find out where exactly she was, and she met her for lunch. And it was something that Noor desperately needed, a friendly face. Both women are trying to get over loss. Noor, the loss of her brother. Rose, the loss of a potential relationship with Peter. And that is the end of Season 2 of The Night Agent. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel and becoming a member. It's only $2.99, and many people think that that's a real great deal. If you don't want to do that, you could always buy a shirt or a hat or a mug or something. What you can't do, though, is leave nasty comments, because those, they make me feel bad. If I made a mistake, you can just keep moving. Hit thumbs down for that. Let me know what you thought of this season, and just know, I really do appreciate you guys checking this out, and hopefully you'll be back for Season 3.